Welcome, dear students. This is a continuation from our previous session on the analysis of a solitary human voice, which is a testimony by Lyudmila Ignatenko. And as you all know, it was the prologue to Svetlana Alexievich's Voices from Chernobyl, Oral History of a Nuclear Disaster, which is an epoch-making book on the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Now, till the previous session, we as readers were being prepared for the disastrous effects that the people of Pripyat were to witness due to the nuclear blast. The most important points to be noted on the post-blast scene are the ignorance of the people regarding the condition of the workmen and regarding the nature and dangers of radiation. Lyudmila Ignatenko narrates the trauma of a population who were unaware of the tragedy that they were in. After using her personal contact to see her husband, Lyudmila realizes that the men were indeed in a very severe and delicate condition. The hospital was not fully equipped to deal with the disaster, and the men were being transported to Moscow. All the while, the people of Pripyat were unaware of the real tragedy that lay ahead for them. They were not aware of the disadvantages of radiation. When Lyudmila, with the help of her doctor friend, sees Vasily, we come to know about the casualty caused by the nuclear disaster. Now, since the whole incident was new to the whole community, there was much unrest about what had to be done. The doctor had advised Lyudmila to get milk for her husband, as it would help in lessening the effects of radiation, like we have already seen in the previous class. When Lyudmila meets Vasily and asks him about what she should do for him, he asks her to get out of the place because she is pregnant. He says, I quote, "Get out of here, you have a child," unquote. It is only at this point that we readers are made aware of the fact that Lyudmila was having a child in her womb. Here we understand that Vasily by this time would have been aware of the damages that could be caused by radiation, even if not the exact details. Now, that might be why Vasily asked Lyudmila to leave the place and take care of the child. It might also be a usual concern so that she doesn't get disturbed in any way. Another important point here is that Lyudmila is never shown thinking about her delicate condition because the nuclear blast changes her focus completely on Vasily. Now, this is another proof of how much love she had for Vasily. And even after her husband asks her to leave the place and take care of the child, Lyudmila's primary concerns are regarding the well-being of Vasily. Now, this, as we will find out later, is not due to the fact that Lyudmila is not concerned about the child. She is concerned about the child. We'll see it at a later stage in this testimony. At this point in the testimony, we are aware of Lyudmila's love for her husband. She stays because of her love for her husband. And if you remember the BBC interview with Lyudmila, all she wanted was to save her husband because of her deep love for him. After seeing Vasily, Lyudmila decides to go and purchase some milk for him. Lyudmila finds her friend Tanya Kibnok in the hospital. Tanya's husband was also admitted there in the hospital. So both these women travel to the nearest village in Tanya's father's car and purchase milk. Now, the women Lyudmila and Tanya, they buy 6 bottles of milk. In each bottle had 3 liters of milk in it. Lyudmila purchases milk not only for her husband, but for all the men there. Now, this shows a very human side of those two women, Lyudmila and Tanya. Once back in the hospital, they both find that the men were in pathetic condition because their bodies completely rejected the milk and they started throwing up. Now, the throwing up shows that the men were severely affected by radiation. Then the situation started getting worse. Many men started getting unconscious and were given IV drips. And as you know, IV stands for intravenous. It is a therapy given for immediate impact, immediate result. In IV therapy, the patient is injected medicines and fluids directly into the veins. This helps in getting the medicines or fluids directly and immediately into the circulation. This is a therapy technique administered for immediate effect and results. The fact that men were put on IV shows the urgent nature of the situation. The doctors did not reveal the truth of the situation to anyone, neither the injured men nor to their families. The doctors informed them that it was the effect of a gas and that the men were poisoned by some sort of gas. The doctors also tell them that there was no specific reason as of why the men were poisoned by the gas. So they make it all seem like some unhappy coincidence. In short, no one was made aware of the severity of the situation. In the testimony, Lyudmila says that the word radiation was not mentioned by anyone at all. Now, this ignorance, as I have already mentioned in the previous classes, caused more damage because people were not aware of the after effects of radiations and they did not take caution, and which they should or would have taken if they were aware of it. To get a better understanding of this case, just imagine the present COVID-19 situation. Think of it, if we were not made aware of this coronavirus and how it spreads and how it affects, then the number of COVID patients would have been much, much higher than the present statistics, isn't it? Now, thinking in this line, being unaware of such situations creates much panic, and being aware of such situations help us a lot. In the case of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, people were not made aware of the situation. They did not understand anything about radiation. The authorities were aware of the dangers of radiation, and so they were not ready to permit others to meet these affected men. As a result, Lyudmila could not meet her husband in the evening. Lyudmila describes how the huge gathering of people had gone completely restless and had crowded around the hospital to meet the men. Lyudmila describes how there was great noise and she could not hear what Vasily had yelled out from the window. Lyudmila was standing under the window outside. Now, someone from the crowd who hears Vasily informs her that Vasily had told her that the men, including him, were being transported to Moscow that night. Vasily also informed them that they would be taken flying to Moscow. This information creates great commotion, and all the wives form a group. They argue with the authorities to meet their men. The wives become angry out of desperation and start arguing with the authorities and the soldiers regarding their rights over their husbands. The women demanded that they should also be allowed to go with the men to Moscow. Now, this is a very legitimate demand on their part, but the authorities were aware of the problems of the radiation and took stringent action. Lyudmila describes how they were shocked to find soldiers at the hospital. The presence of the soldiers added to the panic. The soldiers had taken up the situation and kept people away from the hospital. This very naturally created great commotion. At the peak of the commotion, a doctor asked the women to get clothing for the men because the ones they were wearing had been completely worn out and burned. By the time women get back after getting clothing, they realize that it had been a trap. The authorities had taken the men to Moscow on plane. The women feel trapped. But if we look at it, it could also be seen as a brilliant method of managing people during a chaotic situation. The men were taken to Moscow to be provided with better medical care. It also meant that their conditions required specialized medical treatment, which was available only in big cities like Moscow. Till this point, through Ludmila's narration, we are introduced to the tension created among the public due to the Chernobyl nuclear blast and also their ignorance. The chaotic situation was created more due to the ignorance of the people regarding the nuclear blast, the effects of radiation, and the effects upon the condition of the men who went into help with the Chernobyl nuclear blast. Okay, now we shall continue with the text in the next session. Thank you.